Hello, beautiful people. This is the final episode of 2020. I started this podcast on September 23rd, 2020, and it is finally wrapping up this year. Crazy. Time has absolutely flown by. Grateful if you've been a part of this journey. If this is your first episode, welcome to the journey. We're just on a mission here for self-improvement, becoming the highest version of yourself. My guest today is Jordan Syatt. Jordan is a beast. There's no other way to put it. He's Gary Vaynerchuk's personal trainer, and we got into that story, of course, on this episode. But what I admire about Jordan is his commitment to be open and honest on the internet. He is really raw with a lot of the stories he shared about going to therapy and his insecurities, and it really makes you love this guy. I've never met him. This is the only time I've ever talked to him in my life, but I have such appreciation for this man because of the way he shares his story on the internet. He's a personal trainer, fitness coach. We'll get into all that. But without further ado, this is my conversation with Jordan Syatt.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
One of the things that I admire about your content and everything you've done is that you're so open and honest about who you are and your story. And I'm curious if that is something that you've developed over the years, if that's something you've done on purpose, and how someone could also be so open and honest in their own life.
Yeah, I think it's, first and foremost, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Second, it's definitely something I've had to develop. And if you go back and look at my content I started making content in 2011. So if you go look at my content from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, you'll both see and hear and read a very different creator. And a lot of that is because I was very insecure with who I was and more specifically how I was being perceived. So I created a sort of a fake personality based on what I thought people would respond well to. And I think the best way that explains that is I would use bigger words, more scientific words. I would speak in a way that I don't actually speak in person because I thought people would want to hear that type of speech and talk from a professional. Whereas now, I use Harry Potter references and I talk about I make up random words. I try and have more fun with it. It's far more conversational and it's far more me and who I actually am. I think it's taken a long time for me to get to a point where I feel comfortable enough actually showing myself and who I am and what I love and what I believe. So it's definitely been something that I've had to develop over the years.
Was there a specific moment where that happened for you?
There wasn't a specific moment that I decided, all right, now I'm going to do it. I think it was a series of important moments. So, for example, I remember when I was in high school, I remember vividly kids talking about how stupid Harry Potter is and how it's for nerds. And I would be like, yeah, I've never read that. But I was obsessed with it and I loved it. And I would pretend I didn't read it and I wouldn't read it because it was for nerds. And I remember the first time I put a Harry Potter reference into a social media post, I was actually really worried about it. I thought people were going to be put off by it. I thought they were going to be like, what is this? Why are you talking about that on a fitness page? But it couldn't have been more opposite. People were like, oh, I love the Harry Potter reference. That was amazing. And that moment created so much joy for me. And it showed me that people were not only going to hate on me for it, but they actually supported and enjoyed me for it. So then it was these mini moments, these mini wins that stacked up over time that allowed me to be more and more open and honest about who I am. I remember the first time I made a post about me being insecure about being short and being bald. right? I was nervous to post it, but once I posted it, the response was overwhelming, and people were sharing their insecurities with me about whether maybe they're overweight, or maybe they have insecurities about how much money they make, or they have insecurities about like relative to one of their siblings. So the more and more I shared openly and honestly, the more I realized, man, this is really what people want and need.
It reminds me of something that James Altucher touches on a bunch, which is that he doesn't press publish on a piece of writing until he feels as if he's scared to write it and scared to publish it. And it's interesting.
I love that.
It's interesting how that is something, a way for us to be able to, as writers, as creators, for us to say, okay, that's when it's ready. Because so one of the things that has amazed me about you too is that you've been open and honest about talking about your therapy. And I'm very curious about how that's gone for you, and why, if you don't mind sharing, why you felt like you needed to go to therapy and what it's done for you.
Man, so it's interesting. I thought about going to therapy for a long time. Like I really wanted to do therapy. I knew it was a good idea, and mainly because I was having a lot of anxiety. And a lot of anxiety around social media. There were a number of reasons about why I think I was having anxiety, and reasons why I thought it would be important for me to go to therapy. But essentially what ended up happening was I put it off for any number of reasons. And then what happened is I was having issues with my payment for my insurance company. So, and this is just being fully honest and transparent. My payment wasn't going through, and I didn't know why. So I ended up getting on a call with them, and it turned out that it wasn't going through because they were having issues on their end, and it was a company-wide thing. And like 60% of the people on the health insurance, they weren't actually going through on auto pay. So they fixed that. They're like, "Is there anything else we can help you with?" And I was like, "Well, actually, I've been thinking about going to therapy. Do you have any therapists in my network?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll send you a whole PDF." So they sent me a whole PDF of therapists. And then, I went through and I saw like, all right, I got to check which ones are more like in line with anxiety. And I saw the phone numbers. So I called like 4 to 6 different offices, and it was on a Sunday. And one of them got back to me. And that was the one that I just so happened to end up start seeing. And I've been with him for about 3-4 months now, and it's been great. The reason I tell this story in the way that I told it is specifically because I did put it off for a long time. I knew that I needed to do it, but really I didn't seek it out. It just so happened to be that I had to make that call about my payment, and I just took advantage of it in that moment. So I think, I want to be transparent in that sense, because even though I didn't go out of my way to do it, I'm very glad that I finally fucking did it and that it actually happened.
And so what has been the biggest takeaway from your 3 or 4 months of work?
Oh man, there's a lot. There's been a lot. But I think probably the biggest one that comes straight to the top of my mind is and I think a lot of people might resonate with this, is I do something that's called catastrophizing, which basically is in any situation, something might happen, you might do something, you might see something, and all of a sudden you start going worst case scenario in your head, coming up with all of these things that may happen as a result of what you did, what you said, what you posted, what you thought, like all of the worst case scenario potential options that could happen as a result of it. Losing your business, losing all your clients, losing your job, losing your relationship, all this stuff. And in your head, it can almost make logical sense because like you posted or said this one thing, and then someone might misinterpret it, and then they'll go around saying all this. And a lot of it stems from this cancel culture, which has been so popular over the last like 4 or 5 years. Just people all over the world losing their careers because of cancel culture. So like that has been something that petrified me, the idea of losing everything that I had because of what someone might say or do about what I've said. So being able to recognize when I'm catastrophizing and realizing like, listen, number one, it hasn't happened. And number two is the chances of whatever like this worst case scenario actually happening is so small and so minuscule that it's outrageous to be worried about it. Not to mention, even if it does happen, it's not going to be nearly as bad as you make up in your head. And you can always continue to work and get better and improve. Like you're never done unless you decide you're done. So really understanding that has helped me a lot.
That's an incredible insight. And I think that's something we all tend to do. And I think it comes from like evolutionarily, or in the past, we had to think about what's the next thing that's going to kill us. And if you extrapolate that mentality and that software to our current state of mind, like the worst thing that could happen to us is for us to post something online and for people to hate us about it. Like it's I believe it's a function of our evolutionary past.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes total sense.
So kind of switching gears a little bit is you did something that I've probably told to maybe 10 or 20 different people in real life, and that is the Big Mac Challenge. And I talk about it to this day. And the Big Mac Challenge was so important for me because it unlocked the key to explain to people that it's just calories, right? That calories are the most important thing. And so tell me about why you got the idea to create this challenge. And I know it's been a while, but what the feedback has been since you released it.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, it's just over a year since I released it, which is crazy. But I wanted to do something like the Big Mac Challenge for years and years and years. And it started because I hated Super Size Me. Like, I really hated it. I think it was a very biased, very narrative-driven documentary that was done with the intent to scare people away from having fast food. And I'm not a proponent of fast food. I'm not saying I didn't eat more of it, but I am against fear-mongering, and I am vehemently against the idea of cherry-picking data and presenting it in a way in order to share your preconceived notion rather than actually the facts and finding out what's true. And that's what I think most documentaries should be focused on doing, finding the truth rather than just presenting the narrative that you want people to see. So I hated Super Size Me, and I wanted to do my own version of it for years. And finally, it got to a point where I was like, listen, like now's the best time. Like, let's do it. Like, why not do it for the next 30 days? So I ate one Big Mac a day every day for 30 days straight. And it wasn't just one Big Mac. I ate a regular diet on top of that, but I made sure to include one Big Mac a day every single day. And over the course of those 30 days, I lost 7 pounds, and my health and performance improved in conjunction with eating a Big Mac every single day. And people loved it, man. It was interesting. When I first started doing the challenge and I was documenting it on Instagram, I got a lot of kickback, got a lot of negative feedback. People were like, why are you promoting eating McDonald's? This is bad. This is unhealthy. But by the end of the 30 days, they realized I wasn't promoting eating more McDonald's. I'm not saying go out and eat more Big Macs, go out and eat more Twinkies, go out and eat more fast food. What I am saying is you should be able to enjoy your favorite foods in moderation without feeling guilty. Right? You should, if you're a mother and you have 3 kids in your car and they're screaming their heads off because they're hungry, and you're driving by McDonald's and they're like, I want McDonald's, and you're stressed out of your mind and they're not going to be able to eat for another 4 hours. So you take them into McDonald's. You shouldn't feel guilty about giving your kids McDonald's that time. It's not the end all be all. It's not going to ruin their health. It's not going to ruin their progress. It's not bad. You should be able to do that and feel okay, because you're not poisoning them. If that's every meal 3 times a day for a year straight, yeah, that's probably not the best option. But if you're having pizza at your daughter's birthday party, God forbid you have a couple slices, you shouldn't feel guilty about that. You shouldn't be angry that you're doing that. And I think that's a movie like Super Size Me creates that fear. It creates that guilt. It tells people like, oh my God, you had this poison, you're ruining your body. When it's like, no, there's a middle ground here. You can have a slice of pizza. You could have a Big Mac. You could have some cake and then get right back on track. And I think that's really what Super Size Me really did a poor job of, and that I tried to make more clear in the Big Mac Challenge.
It was just such a interesting way of going about something. And I go back and I think about that, of where did that creation come from, that idea to do that? It was just like, you saw Super Size Me, you're like, this is not the way I want people to think of fast food. Is that kind of how your thought process worked there?
Initially what happened was it sort of transformed and morphed as I went through it. But the initial thought process was this guy gained, I believe, about 30 pounds eating McDonald's 3 times a day, every day for 30 days. And I just know how bullshit that is. I know how nonsense that is. I know for a fact that he had to try incredibly hard to make that happen. So I was like, you could also eat McDonald's every day and still lose weight and get healthier. It's just about how are you managing everything else in your diet, nutrition, and strength training and sleep and all of that. So my original purpose was to show that eating McDonald's doesn't make you fat. It's eating too much makes you fat, period. So that was my original purpose, and sort of throughout it transformed into showing people, listen, like, you don't have to have this food guilt.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when did you realize, like, of the pushback? I know you've talked about some of the pushback that you got after completing it, and you've spoken about that. How did that affect your psyche?
How did what specifically affect my psyche? I'm sorry.
The negative feedback from people saying, like, this is not good.
Got it. Yeah, it was brutal. It was, especially in the first week, right? Because in the first week, I didn't even fully understand what it was going to transform into. I didn't know the impact it was going to have. And I was getting bombarded with messages from people being like, this is terrible. What are you doing? Like, you call yourself a health and fitness coach, blah, blah, blah. And like, I would say over the first week to 2 weeks, I strongly considered stopping because of the negative feedback. It was getting overwhelming. I was getting hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, of messages every day. And I should note, probably like 90% of them, maybe even 95%, were all positive and appreciative and thankful. But there was still, if you get 500 messages and 5% of them are negative, like, that's a lot, right? And that's a day after day after day thing. So that was it took a big toll on me mentally and emotionally over those first 2 weeks. After the first 2 weeks and people saw what was happening and what my message really was trying to convey, it became like 99.8% positive. And I was glad that I stuck with it. And by the end of the 30 days, almost every single person who originally came out angry and upset and said I was doing something bad came back and apologized and said, I'm sorry. I'm so glad you did this the whole way through. It makes so much sense now. Thank you for doing this. So overall, like, I couldn't be happier that I did it. I to this day, I still think it's the piece of content that I'm most proud of out of every piece of content I've made since July 2011. But yeah, it was very, very difficult, especially in those first couple weeks.
Sticking on the topic of discouragement, I'd love for you to talk about the story from your family friend who talked to you on LinkedIn, and it stuck with me. It stuck with me for a long time. But I'd really love for you to tell that story, and I'd love for you to just explain that to everyone listening.
Yeah. So. Oh man, this is like getting to be a famous story now. So basically, when I first started making content in July of 2011, I was a young kid. I was 20, 21 years old. And, it might be odd for people now because they see my audience on Instagram and YouTube and everything, and they might know who I am. But you have to remember, in July of 2011, I had 0 followers. Instagram didn't exist. I didn't have an Instagram. I was posting on my Facebook and posting on LinkedIn, writing on my website. Like, I was nobody. Still the same person, but I didn't have an audience. And not to mention, social media was completely different back then. People didn't understand that it could be used so much for business, and people didn't understand so much about personal branding. I mean, things have changed in the last decade significantly. So I was posting every day, multiple times a day, on my Facebook, on my LinkedIn, on my Twitter, on various social media platforms, many of which don't even exist anymore. And I was just posting fitness and health tips just like I do now, but in a different format. And I remember a close family friend, a very close family friend, the father of one of my brother's friends, emailed me, and he was basically like, Jordan, stop posting on LinkedIn. Like, you're clogging up my feed. And I had known this guy for about 10 years, and we were very close family friends with him. And I would imagine, looking back, that he was probably just having a bad day or something, and he decided to send the email. But I responded very emotionally and very aggressively and said, Mark, if you don't like it, then you can just fucking unfollow me. And he must have told my mom, because she was very upset about it. She was like, you can't speak to him like that. You can't speak to adults like that. Like, you should, and I was like, I don't care. Like, all I'm doing is trying to help people. And I still stand by that. I still think I could have handled it probably a little bit more maturely than I did. But realistically, if I would say, if he did that to me again now, or if anyone did that to me again now, I probably would react in the exact same way, still emotionally, aggressively, angrily, because I get like that about my work. But either way, interestingly, several years after that, probably 4 or 5 years after that, once my audience had started to build and I had built an online coaching business that people were aware of, I saw him and he was asking me, how's everything going with the business? And it was almost like he had forgotten about the interaction. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And I was just like, Mark, could you imagine if I had taken your advice? Oh man, I just used his first name. Shoot, I've gone this far without ever using his first name. Either way, I was like, could you imagine if I stopped posting, if I took your advice because of the email that you sent? And it's just like, thank God that I didn't do that. And it goes to show, like, if you're passionate about something, if you're passionate about what you're doing, there are always going to be people who tell you to stop, people not to do it, people who are going to try and get you to, like, who try and get in your way to prevent you from doing what you know is right. But I couldn't be luckier and happier that I didn't stop because he told me to. I just kept going. I went harder. And what a blessing, right?
We can cut out the name if you want.
No, it's all right. No one's going to know who it is.
Okay. Yeah, it's such a crazy story and such good motivation for anybody who's creating and anyone who's posting content online. What do you attribute the reason for, this might sound like a dumb question, but what do you attribute the reason for not quitting? You had 0 followers in 2011. You had 0, but you had a strong mission, I assume. And was that the reason why you stuck with it for so long? Because you knew that health and fitness and this was the best information to give to people?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons, not least of which being, when I started posting content on social media, I wasn't expecting to make money from it. I think this is probably like the biggest driving reason I didn't quit, is I wasn't doing it from the perspective of, people, like, when he messaged me and said, hey, stop doing this, it wasn't in my mind like, oh, your career will never work. I had a career. I was a personal trainer. Like, I was fine. It wasn't like I was hurting. Like, I definitely wasn't rich by any means, nor am I now. But I wasn't looking at that as the only way for me to build a career. I was doing it because I just wanted to help people. Like, that was literally it. I was like, I'm posting this information because I know this will help people. And so that's why I got so angry. I was like, fuck off. Like, I know this is helping people. Like, if you'd rather not use this information, then unfollow me, block me. I don't care. But I know people are going to benefit from reading this information. So I think that's really why I have a feeling that I'll tell you, like, the reason I almost quit doing the Big Mac challenge is because I thought it was going to hurt my business. Right? Like, when so many people were messaging me, what are you doing? This is terrible. My first fear was, this is bad for business. And that's where the almost quit came in. But I didn't quit because I knew at the end it was going to help people. Right? Like, I knew when it was all over, the finished product would help people. So same thing in that situation. I didn't quit because I knew it was going to help people. So I really think it boils down to, if you are very confident in what you're doing and the impact it can have on people, then you're less likely to quit because you know it's going to help. But if you're doing it solely from the perspective of your own personal gain, you're probably more likely to quit because it doesn't affect other people as positively. It's only affecting you.
Beautifully said. And when I hear you speak about helping people, I get such a feeling of love that's coming from you and love about what you do. You said, like, you work 80 to 100-hour weeks, and it doesn't surprise me at all. And so I'm curious, what do you love most about what you do?
Man, I really like interacting with people and helping people and watching them transform. I mean, I literally got a message earlier today from someone who started off the message saying, "Thank you so much for saving my life." And it was a message about how my content has helped them overcome disordered eating habits and binge eating and anorexia. And it's like, I'll never get tired of messages like that. And I could go off social media completely, like never use social media again and only interact with people in person, and I would still love it just because I love working with people and helping them improve. And it's what I really enjoy. I think social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, podcast has given me so many different platforms and mediums to accomplish it. And each medium, each platform has different ways in which I can do it effectively, right? So like a podcast, for example, gives me a very long form, and the opportunity to dive into the nuance with people. Whereas Instagram might give me the opportunity to give people just a very base level introduction to what they need and also possibly entertain them in a very brief format. Twitter might just be really punchy and quick. You just get them on board to, okay, maybe it gives me an idea for what topics people are interested in so that I can make longer form content elsewhere. YouTube gives me the opportunity to develop a relationship with people like in person. They can see me, they can hear me, they can listen to me. It's like a much more personally driven style of content where they're actually watching me and they can interact with me in that way. And I can draw pictures for them and show them live what's actually going on. So each medium allows me to help people in a different way. Still oftentimes all the same messages, helping people fix the same problems because I can only be an expert in so many things, right? So strength training, nutrition, specifically nutrition around fat loss. Like if you want to learn gut health, don't come to me. I don't know anything about gut health, but I can definitely help you lose weight, build muscle, build a healthier relationship with food. So, I mean, I think it really just comes down to I love helping people in this specific realm that I'm fortunate enough to have this knowledge that I have.
How do you balance those specific platforms? Like you just rattled off, 4 or 5 different platforms, and it's like, how do you think about where should I prioritize my time today?
Man, so I mean, it's interesting. I think it's easy to think like, man, like he's got it all balanced, he's got it all figured out because you go to each different platform and maybe there's a relatively large audience and there's a lot of content. But you have to remember, I've been doing this since 2011, right? So you go to my website, you'll have over 500 articles. That's a lot of articles. But I haven't published an article on my website since like 2015. Because I've been focusing on other platforms. But I did focus on that website from 2011 to 2015. Then in terms of YouTube, I sporadically posted from 2012 to 2015. Then from 2016 to 2019, I went hard. And really all of 2019, I went really hard on YouTube in early 2020. I've only posted a few, like 4 YouTube videos all of 2020. I'm going to start getting into it again, but I haven't posted on there in a while. Twitter, I post maybe once or twice a day. Instagram, I post once or twice a day. I go through different phases. Same my email list too. Like I spent about 3 years almost solely focusing on my email list, and now it's something that I just do sporadically. But I sort of attribute this to what I call goal stacking, where you focus on one thing intensely for a significant period of time, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. You focus on that one thing. You get amazingly good at that one thing. It doesn't mean you ignore everything else, but you don't give everything else a ton of attention. You sort of just maintain it, right? In strength training, we would call this conjugated periodization, where you focus on one thing, but you maintain everything else. And maintaining something is far less rigorous than building something. So I focus on building Instagram for 3 years. Then I maintain everything else. I focus on building my email list for 3 years, and I maintain everything else. Then after 6, 9, 12 years of doing all of that, I have 4 to 6 different things that are all monsters, and I can sort of go to each of them as I see fit. But it took a decade to build that.
Yeah. And my question then is, do you ever feel a sense of like, oh shit, I should be posting on YouTube? Do you feel
absolutely.
Do you feel a sense of guilt for ignoring one platform over the other?
Absolutely. I would be lying if I said no. Yes, I feel guilty that I haven't posted on YouTube in several months. I have been focusing more on my podcast and Instagram, and specifically podcast. The podcast, really what I focus on now is I focus on the medium that I enjoy the most. I enjoy doing podcasts the most right now, and I have for the better part of ever actually since coronavirus started. Since coronavirus started, and it was difficult to do videos, and it was difficult to do things in person. You can podcast remotely like you and I are now, and I started doing more of them, doing between 2 to 3 a day every day, and I've fallen in love with it. I enjoy having conversations like this with someone who I might not have ever spoken to before. People all over the world, in New Zealand, in China, in Singapore, in South America. I've podcasted with people all over the world who I never would have met, who maybe I'll never meet in person, but I've had wonderful conversations with them. I really enjoy it, and you can go really in depth and have tremendous nuance. And people will also pay attention for an hour, 2 hours on a podcast, whereas on Instagram, they might watch like 4 seconds of a 60-second video and say, this is too long. So I'm focusing right now on podcasts because I really enjoy it and because I can really get into the nuance. I'm feeling the itch to get back into YouTube. I'm feeling it more. And so I even I got more equipment. I'm ready to go. I have some ideas set up. So I'll be getting back into YouTube. But so yes, I do feel guilty about it, but I also know if I only focus on one thing and really just go hard on that one thing, the only positive outcome is great. That's the only positive. That's the only outcome option. It's just greatness from doing that one thing. I also understand it's not going to happen in a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or a year. It's going to take 2 to 4 years. But just by only focusing on my podcast for the last 6 months, it went from like less than 1 million downloads to over 2 million downloads, just because I've really been focusing on that. So I know for a fact that as long as I focus on the one thing that I really enjoy and I actually really focus on it, then it's going to build a hell of an audience and it's going to do really, really well. It's just going to take a long time.
And one thing about you that sticks out is you have so many ideas, it seems like. It seems like, you have the Big Mac Challenge, you have things that you create content, and I'm sure it's because you've been doing it so long, but the ideas that you have are so unique and so interesting. So do you have a specific process for creating ideas, or is it just like a muscle that you've built over time? What advice would you give to someone who's trying to think of new ideas and trying to build their content creation muscle?
Man, I think the best thing that I can say about content creation is it's a skill. Right. It's a skill and it takes a lot of time. I mean, there's a reason why if you go back and look at my website articles from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, you're going to see all of the same topics discussed that I discussed today. All of them. I've discussed them for over a decade, and I'll continue to discuss them for the next decade and 2 decades and 4 decades until I eventually retire. Right. Like I'll discuss the same topics, and the difference will be not necessarily the topic. The difference will be how I present the topic. And that's really what's great about all these different mediums is it gives you an opportunity to present the same topic in different ways. I also grew up in a family of educators, right? Like uncles and cousins and my mom and all these people who are teachers and professors, superintendents, and their job is to educate. And I was in actually interesting, ironically, I was in special education. So I'm in a family of people who are all unbelievably smart and especially book smart. And I was in special education. And that was a huge point of insecurity for me, being taken to a different room for tests and getting extra time on tests and having a note card. They wouldn't let me take a language in school because they would take me to a private room that they would give me like special education classes. And it was super embarrassing as a kid and I hated it. But what it allowed me to do is it gave me an opportunity to find what ways I learn better and how to learn the same topics that everyone else was learning, but in a different way, because whatever way they were teaching me, it wasn't working. It didn't click like all the other kids. So one thing that I've really taken pride in is learning how to educate people in not only a simple way, but an entertaining way, how to make things stick, how to really make certain topics stick and help people understand it and learn it and remember it forever. So I think for me, a lot of coaches, they get upset. I've said the same things over and over and over again. It's like, well, yeah, but if you're a really good fucking coach and a great educator, you'll find a new way to say it that will make people learn it even better. And so I think for me, even though I've been talking about the same topics, content creation is a skill that you'll develop over time because you'll learn how to say it in new and exciting and different and better ways to impact and help more people.
It's beautifully said. And
on top of that, sorry to interrupt, the only way to really understand that is to end up posting stuff that doesn't do well, right? Like a lot of the stuff that I post, even now, people don't remember the stuff that I post that doesn't do well. right? Like they don't remember that. People don't remember like the post that I posted and only got 4 likes. People don't remember that. People don't remember if I put up a post today. I'm not going to tell you what platform. I'm not going to tell you what format it was in. I put up a post today that isn't doing well. No one's going to remember that, but I am. And it's going to help me learn, okay, cool, like that didn't do well. Why not? Maybe it's because of how I posted it. Maybe it's because of the topic discussed. And I have my own ideas for it. No one will fucking remember the post that I put up today and didn't do well because they're only focused on comparing themselves to someone who's doing better than them. So if they see a post of mine that does super well, then they'll compare themselves to it and they'll be like, oh, I suck. Everything he does is better than me, blah, blah, blah. And they're just really hard on themselves. The only way that you learn about what works is by posting stuff that doesn't do well. And then when something does do well, you can compare the two and figure out, okay, here's why this did well. Let me figure that out the next time.
And when did that shift happen in you? Was that like something that you've always thought about, or was that a more recent development?
I would say it's a more recent development relatively in terms of probably the last 3 to 4 years. I think I started thinking about content like that in the last 3 to 4 years. The thing about me is I have a really interesting advantage in that it took me a long time to actually quote unquote blow up, right? Like for example, we both know Mike Vacanti, right?
Yeah, of course. Episode number 6.
So Mike, he got in the online world 2 or 3 years after I did, and his business blew up significantly bigger than mine did, way faster. Now, I look at that. I think a lot of people would look at that in the same way that people look at weight loss. They're like, oh, they lost weight faster than me. They lose weight easier than me, and they get upset and jealous, and they use that as a justification to quit. For me, that's just not how I work. It took me way longer to actually, quote unquote, succeed or make it, right? And I don't even think I'm there yet. I think I have a long way to go. But I think a lot of people look at me as a benchmark for what they would like to achieve. And I think the message I want to get across is I think me being in special education as a kid and taking a lot longer to learn the things that everyone else was learning helped me a lot. Because from a very young age, I learned, listen, like it's just going to take longer. So keep fucking working. Go. What's the point of quitting? What's the point of stopping? It's just going to take you longer. So keep going. And so for me, it took me a longer time to actually like sort of blow up. But also what happened as a result of that is over time, I've realized that trying to collect my thoughts here. Over time, I've realized that in the same way that when you weigh yourself, you can't judge your self-worth and you can't judge your progress by any single weigh-in, right? It's the cumulative weigh-ins over time. So same thing goes for social media posts. Someone posts something on social media, they get 7 likes, they get pissed off, they think no one likes me, no one likes my content, they get really mad. But if you just look at that one post as data and understand, okay, cool, so this is the first post of the next 1,000 posts over the coming year. Let's track the data over time, and you get less emotional about that one post and more logical about what you're posting. And you know you're not going to stop posting for several years because this is just what you've committed to. Well, now you have a much better idea of what to go for, and that one bad response doesn't mean anything because you're going to keep posting anyway.
I love it, man. It's something that I'm constantly thinking about, and I'm so grateful that you brought that up. Now, switching gears slightly is you have something called the Inner Circle, which seems like a great program for people to check out. And what you have on your website is that people will have a mindset shift. And I'm curious about what are some of the biggest mindset shifts that people in the Inner Circle tend to notice after spending a month or 3 months in the program.
Listen, I'll say this. And number one, I appreciate you bringing the Inner Circle up. I will say to anyone listening, do not buy anything from me, including the Inner Circle, until you go look at my free content first, right? Like look at all my free content, go look at everything. If you decide you like it and you want to consider buying something from me, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But there's no reason to purchase anything from me until you go through a lot of my free content and what's freely available, which is a lot. I would say for the Inner Circle, most of the people join because they want help with their workouts. They don't know what to do. Maybe they're a complete beginner. Maybe they have no equipment at home. They only have their body weight and they don't know what to do. Maybe they're literally a higher level power lifter or an intermediate lifter who wants to get into powerlifting. The thing in the inner circle is there's always something for everybody. So there's stuff for exercise. A lot of the people come in there to help improve their relationship with food. Maybe they struggle with binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating, and they don't really know what to do to overcome it. Maybe they're struggling with losing weight, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 200 pounds. We have people from literally every range of that spectrum. Regardless of whether you're going in there because you want body weight workouts, powerlifting workouts, kettlebell workouts, you want to improve your relationship with food, you want to lose weight, whatever, regardless of why you're coming in, I think the major overarching thing that people take away from it is you can have fun with it and you can enjoy it. And as long as you're patient and consistent, you're going to achieve your goals. You're going to make incredible progress. I think most people, when they come in, they don't realize how much fun they can actually have, and they don't realize how inconsistent they've been in the past because they've been doing things they haven't enjoyed. But once you find something you actually enjoy, consistency is very easy.
It's so funny that you say that because I believe that was my biggest takeaway from working with Mike Vacanti, which was oh my God, this is easy, this is enjoyable, and I'm making progress. Like, I don't get it. Like, I thought it's supposed to be difficult, right? And it's so fascinating how we can almost be our worst enemy when we are trying to improve a new habit, like thinking we need to go so hard, we need to do all these crazy things, but it can actually be easy in a lot of cases if you just go with the process.
Absolutely, 100%.
I wanted to talk to you about Gary Vaynerchuk because I'm sure people are going to be listening to this and see who you are and want to know that story of how you became Gary Vaynerchuk's personal trainer. So let's dive into that briefly, if you could give the cliff notes there.
Yeah. So I mean, I could talk for a long time and I can ramble. And for whatever it's worth, I have a whole YouTube video on that. But briefly, like I said, I've been making content since July of 2011, and I was living in Israel, and Gary's first coach, Mike Vacanti, and I had been connected because Mike found my content online in 2012. So Mike was an accountant in the Midwest. He eventually moved to New York. He quit his job, moved to New York, got for an unpaid internship. Through that unpaid internship, he ended up meeting Gary, and he became Gary's coach. Then he signed on to coach Gary for 2 years. And near the end of their agreement, Gary asked Mike if he wanted to renew, and Mike said no. He was done. So Gary said, all right, who's going to coach me next? And he said, I think I know a guy. And he was thinking about me because he had consumed my content for years, and he knew that my specialties would help with what Gary was struggling with, which was a lot of pain and mobility issues. So Mike and I were talking, and basically I moved from Tel Aviv to New York to coach Gary for 3 years.
And what I'm fascinated by is the way that Gary has impacted you personally. And I'd love for you to explain in your own words the ways in which he has personally impacted you. Forget about the business stuff, I guess, but I guess it's all related, but just personal impact.
Man, there's a lot. There's a lot of ways that Gary has personally and professionally impacted me in a very positive way. I would say probably one of the best ways is to take complete and utter blame and responsibility always, even if it's not my fault. It's always my fault. And I think a lot of people get really mad when they hear him say this or when they hear me reiterate it. But not everything is your fault. And you're right, not everything is actually your fault. But it's sort of like a mindset trick, right? Where if you notice yourself getting angry at people or upset or you're judging them, whatever it is, like you feel like they owe you something, they're not being loyal, whatever it may be, and you notice yourself getting mad at them, the easiest way to get rid of that useless energy, that not only useless, that toxic energy that does more harm to you than it does to them, right? To harbor these ill feelings and ill will and anger and jealousy and this feeling of being betrayed, it does more harm to you than them. because it's just sitting inside of you. It's a toxic poison. And the best way to get out of that is to say, well, it's your fault. Because when it's your fault, you're in control. When it's your fault, you're the one that can decide what happens next. And you can choose. It's not them in control, it's you. So you taking control of that responsibility, you now have control over the emotions and the feelings that come as a result of it. And so for me, I think that's one of the best things I've been able to do is I've really been able to separate my emotions from my decisions, which from a business perspective and also a relationship perspective is incredibly important, because if you're allowing your emotions to dictate your actions, you're going to be doing some really stupid, rash things. So for me, taking full responsibility for everything, and by the way, this is still not easy. It's still something I struggle with, but in the same way that now I know when I catastrophize, I can now put a name to it. I can put a word to it, and I can recognize, hey, you're sort of going a little bit too crazy here. Like, you know, that's probably not going to happen. Relax. I can, anytime I notice myself getting angry or upset or whatever, I can say, hey, it's your fault. And that immediately takes away a lot of the pain or anguish I'm going through.
Extreme ownership, so important. And what is an example of that, of you doing that actually in your own life?
Oh man, let's see. And I'm going to try and think of a recent example of that in my own life. I will say, so my second ever videographer, not Rico. Rico's my third, and Rico's amazing. My second ever videographer, he just didn't do a great job. He would always show up late. There were a couple times he didn't show up at all. He was very difficult to work with. Very talented kid and really an amazing videographer. We didn't click and we didn't get along well. And I could feel myself getting really angry because of all of the things that he wasn't doing. Like, he wasn't showing up on time. He wasn't doing what he said he was going to do. And I was getting really upset about it. And I think for me, I could feel that, like, I was letting the relationship prolong, and I was getting resentful because of that. And one of the best things I was able to do is just say, listen, like, this is my fault. Like, whatever happens next, it's because it's my decision. So I need to figure out what to do now in this business relationship to make sure that him and I are still on good terms. I don't ever want to burn a bridge. I don't ever want to make someone feel bad, but I also need to do what's best for me. So me taking complete ownership of the situation, understanding what had happened up to that point was completely and utterly my fault, and then making the next decision to benefit both of us. And that made the decision very swift, very easy, like ended on good terms. And if he ever needs help, he knows he can always come to me. And if we ever need to chat, we can always chat. But that allowed me to get over that situation very, very quickly and move on and find out what's next.
Makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned something before about energy. And when I think of you, I think of someone who has such great energy and is so enthusiastic about life. What are the ways that you cultivate that energy? What are the ways that you bring that to the table? I mean, it's infectious, man. It really is.
I appreciate that a lot, man. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think anyone who's ever been on a date with someone, doesn't even have to be a date, right? You could just be talking to someone who's very passionate about what they do, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to know anything about what they do, but if they're passionate about it, you're going to be very interested in what they're saying. Like, you could literally be talking about someone who mows grass for a living. But if they're passionate about mowing grass and they're telling you about why they're passionate about mowing grass and what they love about mowing grass and why mowing grass is so damn important and fun and why it's like the pride and joy of their life, how they got into it, you're going to be like, I fucking love mowing grass. Like, I'm all about mowing grass. This guy got me into the mowing grass. Like, I love it because of how passionate they are. And so, I mean, if you had me talk about light bulbs, I would not be very exciting. I wouldn't be like the most passionate speaker. I wouldn't really be captivating. I wouldn't really bring a great energy to that discussion. But talking about health and fitness and mental health and personal development, like deadlifts, I'm super passionate about it. So I think really what you see is me when I'm on my game, when I'm at my best, when I'm doing what I love. And you take anybody, you put them in a position in which they can talk about doing what they love doing, and they're going to be captivating and exciting. And I think if you really want to encapsulate that and show people your best self, then you've got to really do what you love, because there's nothing more exciting than watching someone do what they love.
So let me ask you then, what do you do in a situation? Let's say you have to do a project all Saturday that you don't want to do for whatever reason.
Oh, man.
So what do you do in that situation to get yourself, I guess, maybe not high energy about it, but to trick your mind? Or what are you thinking in that type of situation?
Well, the first thing I do is I procrastinate incessantly.
I love the honesty.
I absolutely, like, if it's something I don't want to do, I will play video games. I'll do, you know what, you can always tell when I'm procrastinating whenever I do an Instagram Q&A. Anytime I do an Instagram Q&A, I am procrastinating. I promise you. Because I love doing Instagram Q&As. They're my favorite thing, or one of my favorite things. If I'm doing that, I'm actively avoiding doing something else. I promise, every single time. In order to me to actually do it, usually it has to be close to the deadline to which it has to be done. There has to be some type of fire under my ass in terms of, like, there's a fear there. And this is just being honest. Like, I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm just saying this is the truthful answer. It has to be very close to when it's supposed to be done. And then the other thing is, and I've spoken about this before, is I put myself in detention, which is very fitting because I found myself in detention a lot as a kid. But when you're in detention, you just got to wait it out. Like, you have to do it, right? If you don't do it, you're going to be given more detentions, and maybe the punishment will be even more severe. And you just got to sit there. You just got to do it. You got to do your detention. You got to do it. And for me, that's actually helped me a lot in life, whether it was getting through college, through other times in my life. Having this mindset of just, I'm in detention right now has helped me a lot, because it's something I've got to do. It has to get done, so might as well make it worthwhile and just sit down and shut up and do it. So sort of having that detention mindset has helped me a lot.
Do you have like a detention slip, or like, do you have any way to signify that you're in detention, or is it just like a mental trick?
Is it literally all mental, where I'm just like, all right, I'm going in detention. I'll tell my fiance I'm going to detention. She'll know. And that's it. I just sit at my desk and that's it. Once I'm sitting down in there, it's so funny. I will actively avoid my desk, because once I'm there, that's when I know I'm in detention. So, I'll lie on the couch, I'll go on the bike, I'll walk around the apartment, I'll do anything. But as soon as I'm at my desk, I know I'm in detention. So my procrastination will find me anywhere except at my desk.
Makes complete sense. And switching gears into something you love, or it seems like you love, and that's Jiu Jitsu. And I've been so impressed by your ability to start something new and be a beginner again, where you have all this knowledge in weight training and nutrition and social media growth, right? You have all this knowledge, but you're like, you know what? I love the beginning. Maybe you don't love it, but you put yourself in that position to start again. So my question is, why did you start Jiu Jitsu as opposed to, let's say, boxing or Muay Thai or whatever? And what have you learned from doing it? Yeah,
so there's a lot. So number one is, before I even get into specifically Jiu Jitsu, I love being a beginner, and I love knowing nothing. For a number of reasons. And I remember being a kid, I vividly remember, because I hated school. And my mom would always tell me, she would always say, if I could be a professional student for my whole life, that would be her dream job, just like to go to school and learn. And I remember as a kid, I was like, you're out of your mind. Like, school sucks. But now I'm like, oh, you know what? I understand what she means. Like, it's a really wonderful feeling to be able to go and learn something that you just don't understand or that you've never heard of before, and to have the opportunity to learn. It's a blessing. So I really relate to what she used to say. And in terms of being a beginner, I would consider myself an expert in strength training. I'd consider myself an expert in weight loss. I'd consider myself an expert in developing a better relationship with food. I consider myself an expert in building a social media following and building a personal brand and creating content. The thing is, when you reach an expert level in something I've noticed is sometimes the passion will dwindle, and I think sometimes that'll happen because as you get better and better and better, as you master something, you learn less and less. It doesn't mean there's less. It doesn't mean there isn't anything to learn, but the amount that you learn is less. It's fewer and further between. Whereas when you're either, in my case, a literal white belt or a figurative white belt in something in which you know absolutely nothing, you're learning all the time. It's every day is new discovery. So like when you go to the gym, the first 6 months of lifting, you're like, I'm getting stronger every rep. I'm lifting way more weight than I did last week. Like last week, I could only bench 20 pounds. And I'm doing 35 pounds. Holy hell, I am a beast. And it's so exciting because you see the hand over fist growth. So I really enjoy the aspect of being brand new to something. Number one, because you learn so much, just the gains, physical and mental, are huge, but also because, and this is something I didn't understand until my business really, really grew, is there was no expectation of me to know anything. The pressure for me to be knowledgeable was non-existent because I was a white belt. I am a white belt still. Like, people don't expect me to be good or know anything because I shouldn't. There's no precedent for it. I'm not an expert. Whereas in fitness and nutrition and strength training and all this stuff, like, I'm expected to have the answers at all times. That is expected of me. And it's a blessing in some cases and a curse in others. And you can feel a lot of pressure to live up to that. Whereas when I go to jiu-jitsu, like, people don't care about my social media audience. People don't care about how good I am at nutrition or deadlifting. Like, I deadlift more than every single person in my jiu-jitsu gym, and every single one of them can kick the living shit out of me. My strength means nothing. They can all choke me out in less than 10 seconds. They can all break my arm if they wanted to. They can all beat me senseless. My strength means nothing. So I'm there to learn from them. They're the experts, and it's very freeing to go somewhere and say, you're the expert. You teach me. I know nothing. So I love that aspect of it. And I got into jiu-jitsu because I wrestled my whole life. I wrestled from 8 years old to 18 years old. And wrestling and jiu-jitsu are very similar. They're both grappling sports. They're very different, but relatively similar. And I've done boxing before. I really enjoyed boxing. I've done Krav Maga. I've really enjoyed that. I've done some form of fighting my whole life. But jiu-jitsu, number one, the nostalgia of wrestling, it's very similar. So I really enjoy that part. But also, from a practicality perspective, if I could only know one fighting style, if I could literally only know one, I would say jiu-jitsu would be the best and most practical fighting style to know if I was concerned about getting into an altercation on the street or someone breaking into my home. I think the number one thing that anyone should know is jiu-jitsu.
Makes a lot of sense. And before we wrap this baby up, I'd love, this podcast will go live the second to last day of December. So people are listening to this right in 2021 or at the end of 2020. What do you have for people at the end of the year or starting a new year?
I would say, man, this is not going to be groundbreaking at all. It's going to be very anticlimactic. I would say I would write your goals down. And it's sort of one of my first tips for people who want to lose weight is to don't track your calories. Don't track anything. Just write everything down. Write everything you eat down for 3 days, for 72 hours. Write everything, including, I don't care if it's an ice cube. I don't care if it's a sip of water. Write everything you put in your mouth down. Because when you write it down, it's going to be staring you right in the face. And you'll be shocked at how much you're actually eating, especially if weight loss is a goal and you struggle with losing weight. Same thing with goals. A lot of people, they have goals and they know, like, in their mind, like, generally, but they don't have specific goals, and they rarely ever write them down. So for me, I write them down and I'd separate them between action-based goals and objective-based goals. So most people, they have an idea of what their objective is. I want to lose weight. I want to get stronger. I want to go to the gym. Cool. That's great. But what the fuck does that mean? Like, we have to create some specificity here. So number one, I would say, is get specific with your objective. You want to lose weight? How much weight? You want to go to the gym? How many times a week do you want to go to the gym? Let's create some specificity here. It's not just go to the gym. You want to go to the gym 4 times a week. You want to lose 25 pounds, right? Like, let's get very specific with what the objective is. And then on top of that, next to every objective, you have to have a list of at least 2 to 3 actions that are going to come with it. So these are your action-based goals. So for example, if you want to lose 25 pounds, cool. Now you have a specific objective-based goal, but your action is going to be, I'm going to count my calories every day. I'm going to hit this number of calories every day. I'm going to hit this amount of protein every day. These are your action-based goals that you can then every day, it's like a to-do list. Did I hit these calories? Did I hit this protein? Did I go to the gym? If you did, cool, you check it off. If you didn't, then you don't check it off. But you have to have both a specific objective and a specific action every day in order to achieve a long-term goal.
You heard here first, folks. Jordan, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find more from you and more information about everything you talked about?
Well, thank you for having me, man. This has been a pleasure. You can find me on YouTube, my own podcast, the Jordan Syatt mini podcast, Instagram. If you Google my name, Jordan Syatt, Syatt, you'll find a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time, man. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate all the content you've put out into the world. Really appreciate your time for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Beautiful people. That was my conversation with Jordan Syatt. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen until the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda is the best place to give me feedback on this episode. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.